We know, and this is from human research, that just eating one kiwi a day will overnight improve your gut microbiome.
The average apple in a grocery store is over a year old.
Are you kidding me?
No, over a year old.
Her CRP and her SED rate, those are markers of inflammation, were so high. Within 4 weeks of being on this protocol, those numbers were all cut in half. In another 4 weeks, now 8 weeks have gone by, her numbers normalized.
I would rather put my resources into the one body that I have. If you were told that you get a car and it's the only car that you're ever going to have for the rest of your life, how are you going to treat that car? Way better than we're treating our bodies.
When we look at red flags, what that really is it's an alert about behavior and characteristics of a person, right? So we'll get like, oh, red flag, they didn't call me. And it's like, that's not a f***ing red flag.
Welcome to a special year-end episode of Toxic-Free with KB. Welcome to Toxic-Free with KB, the podcast where we dive deep into the world of what it means to live a toxic-free life. I'm your host, KB. I'm a toxic-free lifestyle advisor and a diehard advocate for clean living. This journey has been nothing short of transformative. From the rebrand of my show launched this year to traveling across the country for incredible interviews. It's been an unforgettable ride, let me tell you. I've had the privilege of sitting down with some of the most inspiring guests who are some of the best minds in health, toxic-free living, and relationships. To all of my listeners, whether you've been here since day one or recently joining our growing community, thank you for being part of this incredible adventure. In this episode, I'm going to highlight a few of the episodes with some clips. So if you haven't listened to one, now is your time to get a preview and dive in or revisit some of your favorites. Starting with Dr. William Li. Dr. William Li dives deep into the science of food as medicine. Learn how simple diet shifts can supercharge your health, detox your liver naturally, improve your gut, and even boost your mental focus and intimacy through mindful eating. In this episode, you will discover the benefits of spices, teas, and superfoods, plus cutting-edge insights on GLP-1 agonists and nitric oxide. Check out one of my favorite moments from this episode and make sure you tune into the whole incredible conversation.
Tend to your gut health. Now, gut health is very important because we have a gut microbiome. And I think probably you've heard about this and your listeners probably have heard about the gut microbiome. Let me just kind of synthesize it for you. When I went to medical school, we were told that all bacteria are bad, must kill bacteria, must memorize antibiotics and write prescriptions to kill bacteria. Turns out that most of the bacteria that we encounter as humans in our lives are good bacteria, and most of them live inside us. And these good bacteria form a neighborhood, a good working, diverse neighborhood that is all trying to do good. All right. Good, healthy bacteria, known as a microbiome, lowers inflammation, boosts your immune system, helps you heal from the inside out, streamlines your metabolism, and even text messages your brain. So your healthy bacteria SMS your brain, okay, and tell your brain to release social hormones like oxytocin and dopamine and serotonin, all the things that we actually need to feel better and be emotionally healthier as well. So this idea of healthy gut, healthy brain, healthy gut, healthy body, it's completely true. But maybe the most important thing that I would actually communicate to your listeners today is that a healthy gut lowers inflammation. And if you don't actually tend to your gut, no matter what else you take, what steroids, what medications, infusions, your gut is not doing what it's supposed to do, which is to help put out that forest fire. All right. So how do you actually get your gut to do that? Well, first of all, you want to feed your gut what it needs, right? So if you have a pet dog or a cat or a bird or a fish or any kind of pet, you're probably very dutifully, consciously making sure that you're feeding it food every day, and you're trying to feed it good food. You don't feed it junk food. And yet, what do we do to ourselves? We feed ourselves junk food all the time, right? Now, here's the thing. When you feed your bacteria, healthy gut bacteria, it's pet food, all right? The healthy food that it needs, it's dietary fiber from whole plant-based foods. What are some examples of dietary fiber? Things that taste great, all right? avocados. You know, if you're in California, you got a great source of avocados.
Love it.
Broccoli, kale, bok choy, radicchio. So many different leafy greens, lettuces have dietary fiber. Pear is a great source of dietary fiber, about 6 grams of dietary fiber. 20% of your day's dietary fiber is in a pear, all right? Peaches, apples, all great sources of dietary fiber. And look, I'm somebody, as I mentioned, that likes to explore food. I like to, I don't like to stuff my face, but I like to sample food and enjoy the taste of it. There's so many great recipes that you can actually get with these fibrous-y foods. And by the way, avocado is really soft, right? Doesn't feel like it's got a lot of fiber. Broccoli, yeah, okay, it's got some fiber to it. Avocado, one of the richest source of dietary fiber. Another soft food that's packed with great dietary fiber to feed your gut bacteria, to help your gut bacteria do its job as a defense to lower inflammation, are mushrooms.
I love mushrooms. All the mushrooms, give me them.
Even the lowly white button mushroom that anybody can find in any supermarket. Now, if you love mushrooms, you know, like if I invited you to my house, I could say, hey, KB, do you want to do like maitake? You want to do shiitake? We can do enoki. There's all kinds of delicious things you can do. But I want to point out to anybody listening, you don't have to get fancy.
Right.
The lowly white button mushroom will do the trick. And by the way, the dietary fiber is called beta-D-glucan. It's found in the cap of the mushroom, right? So when I was growing up, I was always taught by my mom, because I was watching her cook, what do you do when you get the mushrooms? You clean them off, make sure all the dirt's gone. You take a knife out on a cutting board, you cut off the cap, because you're going to cook with the cap of the mushroom, all right? And the stems kind of go away. I used to throw away the stems. Well, as a food as medicine researcher, we discovered that the cap, which we love to eat, tasty, is packed with beta-glucan, dietary fiber to feed your gut microbiome. We can help lower inflammation in your body. But the stem, which is called the stipe, S-T-I-P-E, that's the stem of the mushroom, has twice as much of the beta-glucan. So don't throw the stems away.
Give me the stems only. Hey.
Cook them, slice them. If you take a look at all these healthy cultures in the Mediterranean, in Asia, they don't waste the food. They eat that stem. And by the way, if you're like, I don't know if I can stomach the stems, I'm just telling you, again, from a practical perspective, all right, put them in a blender, puree them, put them into a soup, or put them into a smoothie. They'll disappear right into the background.
Make a little sauce.
Make a sauce.
For your little pasta.
Exactly.
No, I love mushrooms. You've got to come to Santa Barbara. We have the best farmers market, and we have a whole mushroom stand, and I get all the types. And I used to be the lowly white mushroom. That's how I started. And then I got the little brown cremini, and then you boost on up, and then you try the enoki, and you're like, this is fun. And then
what's your favorite mushroom?
Okay, so I really like shiitake. I probably have shiitakes every night because I can get those quite readily and available. But maitake are probably my most favorite. I do like some trumpets as well.
So which one?
Some trumpets. I slice the trumpets up and I turn them into almost like a scallion.
Yeah.
Well, but the maitake are so, and I'm a vegan, or I don't eat animal. So they give me so much protein and so much stamina and fiber.
Yeah.
I don't even want to you can't even.
I know this isn't a cooking show, but I will say that just hearing you talk about that makes my mouth water, because they're such delicious foods that are also really great for you. And and by the way, maybe now's a good time to talk about the fact that mushrooms have become very popular in the health and wellness space, right? So people go for these medicinal mushrooms, reishi, lion's mane, turkey tail. There's all these mushrooms you can actually get. They mix them in coffee. You can order them dried. I'm not talking about hallucinogenic mushrooms.
Yeah.
I'm talking about medicinal mushrooms that are used in Chinese medicine or Ayurvedic medicine. I want to make maybe a fine point that's actually, I think, as a scientist and a doctor, important for people to hear. If you want to enjoy mushrooms on a regular basis, go for the culinary mushrooms that are known to be used by chefs for cooking. the white button mushrooms, the enokis, shiitakes, the portobellos, the, baby bellas, the porcinis, maitake. Those are cooking mushrooms. And leave the medicinal mushrooms, the lion's mane, turkey tail, reishi mushrooms. Leave those for healers, TCM, traditional Chinese medicine people who know exactly what to do with them.
Right.
Even in China, and I can tell you, I've taken a number of trips to China, and I know lots of Chinese medicine doctors. They tell you that when it's time to use those medicinal mushrooms, they prescribe them in very, very specific ways, in very specific amounts, for very specific ailments. And I think that, what I prefer to tell people is eat the culinary mushrooms for the dietary fiber for your, but leave the medicinal mushrooms for the pros. They were known for thousands of years as medicinal mushrooms. They were not used as culinary mushrooms. So there's plenty of ones that you can enjoy. There's two exceptions, both of which you already mentioned that you like, that are both medicinal and culinary. Shiitake mushrooms have medicinal properties, and they're used for cooking. And maitake, which is a very meaty mushroom. Like you can yes. if you're a vegetarian or a vegan, and you want to have a steak, take a portobello, you could do it too, but just take a maitake mushroom and slice a thick chunk out of it, because it doesn't have a big stem. It's kind of big and bulky. You can slice your own steak out of it and stick it, put a little extra virgin olive oil, a little bit of salt, some herbs, and just stick it on the grill and sear it. It'll cook fast because the meat cooks really, really quickly. And now you've got this beautiful, delicious, amazing source of protein, fiber, polysaccharides, all kinds of goodness for your health, and it lowers inflammation.
Lower the inflammation, gut health, brain health, which I kind of want to go back into that. The gut-brain connection.
Yeah.
A lot of people, and we're talking about drugs too, the drug world, or pharmaceutical drugs, I should say. And when people are so used to, oh my gosh, I have anxiety, I have depression. Some people, yes, do need to have a pharmaceutical drug for a certain amount of time, I believe. But weaning off onto that, you were talking about how gut health, when you really get into control with that, with the food as medicine, focusing on that can almost, dare I say, instantly create a, placebo effect instead of using that prescription drug. Like, how quickly can you heal the gut to boost your brain chemistry in a positive way?
Yeah. Well, so first of all, I'll tell you, while there might be some aspect of placebo effect, the gut effects are very real, and they're biochemical inside your body. Now, I know most of your listeners are probably not scientists, but I can tell you that when you feed your gut bacteria healthy fiber and polyphenols that are known as prebiotics, what you're doing is you're really fertilizing your gut microbiome. You're feeding them good food. They pay you back, right? Like, basically, we give room and board to our healthy bacteria.
Oh, I like that.
We give them the space. By the way, do you know where in your gut the bacteria, most of your gut microbiome lives? You know where in the gut?
Oh my gosh. The intestine?
Yep. It's in the intestines.
Small intestines?
But there's small intestines and large intestines. They live in the large intestines.
Oh, large.
But the large intestines is actually, kind of like an arch. It goes from the bottom, it goes up, and then it crosses your body, and then it goes back down. There is, at the very beginning of the large intestines, a kind of sacky area, like a gunny sack in your colon, and it's called the cecum. And the cecum is exactly where your gut microbiome mostly lives. All right. And that's exactly where your appendix is. Now, when I was in medical school, we were taught the appendix, nobody needs it. We can cut it out. We don't know. It came in evolution. At some point, maybe we needed it. Wrong. We are now beginning to realize that that appendix might be air traffic control for your gut microbiome. And it may also be the regenerator of key bacteria. It might be like the Pez dispenser. You remember those candies?
Yes.
Pez, all right? Or the ammo clip, so that you can actually keep on reloading good bacteria into your gut where it's needed, right there. That's where it all happens, all right? And the reason I'm giving this detail is to really communicate that we don't hand wave anymore. good gut health, lowers inflammation. We know exactly, we are beginning to know more precisely what's going on. We know where it is. When you feed it well, we know what the gut bacteria produce. They produce short chain fatty acids. These are metabolites. We call them SCAFAs, SCFAs. And from your bacteria, it goes right into your bloodstream. So it's not placebo. It's real. It's biochemistry. And these short chain fatty acids, propionate, butyrate, acetate, we even know what the names are, which certain foods can stimulate, right? Like plant-based foods can, and with dietary fiber, including mushrooms, can make butyrate, for example, and that goes into your bloodstream and it starts to lower inflammation. Now, the question you asked is really how quickly can this happen, right? That's important.
Right.
So we know that if you damage the gut microbiome by eating something not so good for you, like
What's an example?
you're at the airport, you want to grab a snack, you go to one of those newsstand-y kind of places and you just grab a snack off the shelf, even one that looks pretty good. If you don't check the ingredient label, you'll find it's got artificial color, it's got artificial preservatives, artificial flavoring. That spice that they have on it, oh man, it's artificial flavoring.
Right.
All right. That will start damaging your gut microbiome. So if you want to heal it, what are some ways to do it? Well, you eat foods that have fiber and polyphenols, prebiotics. And this has been studied, and we now know how quickly it can work. Kiwi fruit, a great source of vitamin C, but also a great source of dietary fiber. We know, and this is from human research, that if you eat even one kiwi a day, all right, and you measure your gut bacteria from your poop before you eat the kiwi, that and you've got some problems with that bacteria, it's dysbiotic, meaning the bacterial balance isn't very healthy. Just eating one kiwi a day will overnight improve your gut microbiome. So the next day, if you check your poop again, all right, and more likely you'll be regular because you're getting dietary fiber, you check it again, you'll already start seeing beneficial bacteria growing back. You'll get like 2 or 3 times of the good stuff already growing back. So this result is fast. Quick to damage, by the way. So that's the other thing.
Yeah.
And we now know, for example, diet sodas, the artificial sweeteners, the aspartame, sucralose, saccharin, those kinds of things that are found in diet sodas, they actually harm your gut microbiome. They actually knock it off kilter. Not good. But have a kiwi, you can actually heal it back up, and it's as quick as starting overnight.
I have discovered this product that has literally changed my life. I use it time and time again when basically I feel as though I need a little more oomph in my self-care routine. I'm talking Medicine Mama's Vulva Care. Guys, did you know that vulvas are a vital part of women's health? Yeah, they have been ignored for far too long. And Vulva Care creates the space and time for women of all ages to get in touch with every part of their bodies. Medicine Mama has done just that. They've created a line of vulva skincare products that are hormone-free, OBGYN approved, clinically tested, and have over 12,000 5-star reviews. Probably more by now. I use the Vulva Balm every single day, and let me tell you, it is so nourishing and luscious and doesn't disrupt my vaginal pH. Holla frickin' Luya, ladies. Try Medicine Mama for yourself and let me know what you think. Get 15% off all menopause, pregnancy, postpartum, grooming, and even sexual wellness products. You know what I'm talking about. You can use my code TOXICFREE15 at checkout. Again, that code for 15% off all purchases, use code TOXICFREE15. Guys, if you want to learn more, tune into Toxic Free with KB, episode number 282 with the Medicine Mama herself, Dr. Claire Bertuccio. I have 2 amazing fur pups. I've got Poppy and I've got Harley Girl. I'm just pretty much a dog freak. When I found Botanical Bones, I had to contact the owner and I had to ask, oh my gosh, can I get some Treatos for my pups? Of course. She sent a whole bundle my way and my dogs are obsessed. So they have 3 specific formulas that I want to shout out, and they are based upon traditional Chinese medicine, which y'all know me, I'm a huge fan of that. So they've got Inner Glow, which has chaga, dandelion root, and ginger. They've got flower power, which is blueberries, red clover, and reishi. And they've also got balance and calm, which has ashwagandha, lemon balm, and hemp seeds. So, of course, you can pick your quote unquote pup's favorite type of flavor, but let me tell you, the dogs will love them all. And trust me, I have literally sniffed them myself, and I'm thinking about trying a handful or two. I want to give you guys 10% off these amazing treats that your dogs will love and then will thank you for time and time again. 10% off using my code HONEST10, because we could all use a little more honesty in our diet, and I think our pups could too. So head on over to botanicalbones.com and use code HONEST10 for 10% off. Let me know what y'all think. Now we have Dr. Stephen Gundry. The clips from this episode hit the millions on my TikTok and my Instagram. Quick plug to follow us if you haven't already. I sit down with Dr. Stephen Gundry, renowned heart surgeon turned nutrition expert, to uncover the secrets to healing your gut and achieving optimal health. Discover the truth about lectins, toxic-free foods, and how to properly read nutrition labels. Learn about Dr. Gundry's incredible 70-pound weight loss, insights from the plant paradox, and key elements from his program inspired by the Blue Zone regions. There were so many gems in this episode, and this clip was one of my favorites. Check it out and make sure you dive into the full episode.
When the organic movement started a few years ago now, when you went to the health food store to get your organic apple, it was all this shriveled up, it didn't look very good and appetizing. That's before they started spraying even organic apples with petrochemical things to keep them from dehydrating. In fact, I learned recently that the average apple in a grocery store is over a year old.
Are you kidding me?
No, over a year old.
Yeah, everyone's like...
Yeah, over a year old. Because we've gotten so good at disguising the fact that these things, you're right, they're never changing.
Yeah.
In fact, as an interesting segue, we lost our home in the mudslide here in Montecito.
Sorry.
The person we bought it from obviously was a Taco Bell fan and was an Oreo fan and was a pretzel fan. And this woman had huge glass containers, filled to the brim, beautifully arranged, of Oreo cookies and pretzels, and also Taco Bell taco sauce things. And they were they were really fun. And I said, if you don't mind, let's leave them here. And because it's kind of cool and it reminds me not to eat these things. Well, we've now been in our house. This will be our 5th year, 6th year, one of the two. These Oreo cookies are as pristine as the day they were put into that jar. The pretzels haven't changed a bit. There is no mold. There is no fungus. There are no bacteria. They are perfect. Now, if a mold or bacteria isn't interested in eating those things, why in the world would we put them in our mouth?
That's a good question. Because the bacteria and the molds in my stomach are not going to want to digest that little emmer.
That's
mother
exactly right.
trucker.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. And I wrote in one of the books, I've forgotten which one, I went to the Santa Barbara Farmers Market, and I went to Costco on the same day. And I bought Costco strawberries and Farmer Market strawberries, organic. Put them in the refrigerator. In 3 days, the Santa Barbara strawberries were covered with mold, beautiful bloom. Nothing on the Costco strawberries. A week later, the Costco strawberries are perfect. 2 weeks later, the Costco strawberries are perfect. A month later, the Costco strawberries are perfect. And it's like, oh my gosh, the mold doesn't have a... Why would I put those things in my mouth? Because not even the mold wants to eat them.
Well, and to be honest, I hate to be I hate to be a hater on Costco because I know the general population does need to shop at large supermarkets or distributors, but we as consumers can also vote by what we buy and what we support. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I like some Costco products. In fact, I've had a podcast on what to buy at Costco.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
We'll tune it in. But going back to the mold and also the gut microbiome, what is that? I know it's been thrown around here and there. And some people are like, well, I still don't quite understand.
So we used to think you swallowed food, it went down this hollow tube, magic happened, and what was left over came out the other side. Presto changeo, that's about all there is to it. We didn't know about the microbiome, this collection of bacteria that live in our mouths, live in our stomach, live in our small intestines, but mostly live in our colon, our large intestine. And it was thanks to the Human Microbiome Project that didn't get completed until 2017 that we didn't know there were 100 trillion organisms living in our gut, probably 10,000 different species of bugs. And then we learned who they were, but we had no idea what they did. And it's with each passing year that we're beginning to understand what each of those bugs does. And it's literally a tropical rainforest in our gut. In a tropical rainforest, there's, all these different species that compete, that cooperate. And if you don't have this species, you're not going to have that species, and blah, blah, blah. With every passing year, we learn more nuances about this literally tropical rainforest and how they relate to us, how they control us, and how they talk to our gut, how they talk to our brain, etc. One of the things we've learned is that there's actually should be bacteria that eat lectins. In fact, as I wrote about in the Plant Paradox, we're supposed to have an amazing defense system against lectins. And our microbiome was very good at eating them. In fact, believe it or not, there are bacteria that like to eat gluten, which happens to be a lectin. Most of us don't have those bacteria anymore because we've killed them off with antibiotics that we not only take for ourselves, but perhaps more importantly, 70% of all the antibiotics that are used in the United States are fed to our farm animals. Because about 40 years ago, it was discovered that, just by accident actually, if you fed antibiotics to animals, they would grow fatter and faster than if you didn't give them antibiotics. Mm-hmm. And so it became routine. Hey, this is great. Let's make some money. Let's, a chicken used to take 4 months, 6 months to resize where you could eat it. Now you can get a chicken to full size in a matter of weeks by giving them antibiotics and other wonderful growth promoting things. So what we didn't know is those antibiotics are in the meat of the things we eat. They're in our beef. They're in our pork. They're
in our water even.
They're in our water. They're in our fish. And what we didn't know was that those antibiotics kill off the bacteria in our gut. And it's like, what the heck? In fact, one round of antibiotics taken for, like a urinary tract infection can decimate, literally burn your tropical rainforest down to the ground. And it can take up to 2 years to repopulate your gut.
Some people have to be on antibiotics.
Yeah.
But there are also some protocols that you can do to protect your gut. And as you like to refer to them, your gut buddies.
Gut buddies.
Gut buddies. I'm going to be devil and I'm going to be the angel. So what are the toxic foods that are harming our gut?
Well, there are too many to count, but...
Name some very common ones.
Well, I think one of the paper that a lot of people ought to read is, grains, the double-edged sword of humanity. Grains allowed us, and grains and beans allowed us to survive, but it was at an incredible cost to our health, and we're still paying that cost. So most grains and beans are loaded with lectins. Now, if you look at cultures through the years, successful cultures have figured out a way to lessen the toxicity of grains. And usually it was by a fermentation. One of the fun things I like to point out to people is the Incas used quinoa as their grain. But the Incas didn't sit around and eat quinoa raw. They didn't just cook quinoa. They actually fermented it. They soaked it. They let it rot. And then they cooked it. And it's not on the package directions. I was just talking with a patient yesterday who happens to be Hispanic, and we were talking about corn. And she said, wow, corn is what my people ate. And, we eat corn and we're used to corn. And I said, well, no, you're not. Corn was so deadly that corn was treated traditionally with lye, with alkali. 2 reasons. Number one, it took the hull off of corn, and the hull, the outer coating of a grain, is where most of the lectins are. So it removed the hull, and you get what's called hominy. And then you would grind hominy into hominy grits, and then you would grind it further, and you would have masa flour. And all traditional flours, tortillas, were made from masa flour because it had been treated with alkali. And that's almost completely lost. Interestingly, there is a very famous Mexican restaurant down on Milpa Street that you and I may have gone to that still uses masa flour to make their tortillas. Can I say the name?
Sure.
La Supa Rica.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little blue building.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was Julia Child, the only place that Julia Child would go and eat Mexican food, because she knew the history of how actually corn was detoxified so it wouldn't kill the people who needed to use corn as their food.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I love that. So a little educational research certainly helps. But, when we talk about preparation, because I know I'm on the lectin-free diet and I'm like, oh, crap. Like I don't eat animal. And so I'm like, all of my protein sources, legumes and, I loved rice and all these things. I'm like, what do I do? And I felt like I was automatically I'm restricting. So you had noted that there are preparation techniques that one can use to help reduce the lectin content, make it easier to digest. What are those?
Well, so for instance, speaking of rice, the main lectins in rice are in the hull. And isn't it interesting that 4 billion people use rice as their staple, and yet 4 billion people go to the trouble of taking the hull off of brown rice and making it white before they eat it, because they're removing the major lectins in rice. Isn't it interesting in Italy, where, particularly in Tuscany, where beans are incredibly popular, they soak their beans for at least 24 hours and usually 48 hours. And anybody who's prepared beans properly know that if you put beans in water and wait a few hours, you will get all this scum up on the top. That scum is actually the fermentation of those beans by the bacteria that actually coat the actual bean. And these guys would, take that off, change the water, do it again, take that off. And so they were detoxifying the lectins in those beans. But nobody does that anymore. They just pour the beans and boil them and say, I'm fine. All of these cultures had these techniques to detoxify. I love the story, and I've heard it from so many Italians. Columbus, Italy's native son, brought tomatoes back to Italy. The Italians refused to eat tomatoes for 200 years because they knew they were a nightshade and they were part of the deadly nightshade family. It wasn't until they realized that the problems were in the peels and the seeds that they started to make tomato sauce, and they'd eat their tomatoes peeled and de-seeded. In fact, fun fact, the Roma tomato was hybridized by the Italians to have the most pulp versus the skin and the seeds. So you could just throw the tomatoes in water for a minute, peel the skin off, cut it in half, and scoop out the seeds and throw them in the pot and make tomato sauce. In fact, I was talking to one winemaker, and he has a beautiful organic garden with huge tomatoes, Roma tomatoes. And I said, so you eat tomatoes? Oh, geez, I wouldn't eat a tomato. Why would I do that? And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, they'll kill you. And I said, what do you mean? He says, my mother taught me that. And I said, well, where'd your mother learn that? And she said, oh, my grandmother taught her that. I said, well, then why did he grow all these? He said, wow, we take the peel off, we take the seeds out, and then we make the sauce. And now it's perfectly safe. Didn't you know that? And I said, well, I knew that. But he says, everybody knows that.
Crazy. It's crazy what different cultures know. And it actually seems really you're oh, it seems very ancestral and old school. But going back to prepping beans and rice. So my mom, as I've mentioned to you, she was a functional nutritionist. So that's how I always knew how to prepare beans. Soak them in water overnight or for at least 8 hours, and the same thing with the rice. I actually went as far as letting it kind of sprout a little bit. Mm-hmm. So is that still safe if people do not own a pressure cooker?
Well, the good news is that you can buy pressure-cooked beans and lentils. There's several companies that make them. Eden brand makes them. Jovial is an Italian company that makes them. And Jovial, just think of a happy person. Yeah. And so there are ways to get these things. Unfortunately, now most beans aren't pressure-cooked. So you got to look for the ones that are pressure-cooked. And then it's perfectly safe. I'll have beans several times a week as long as they're pressure cooked can.
Well, I think you put out a good point, which I want to touch on, which is you just have to look for it. Reading labels. I think that is such an ambiguous world to many people. And we see ingredients on there and they're I don't want to deal with this. I don't have time to look it up. They grab something, they eat it, whatever. They're on the go. So when we are reading a label, what is the first thing that we should look at on a label? Well,
that's a complicated subject since 80% of the food we eat is now processed or ultra-processed. Probably the first thing to realize is if something has a label with ingredients in it, put it back because you don't want to eat it. I think that's the best advice I can give anyone. There's no label on a head of broccoli. There's no label on a head of lettuce. There's no label on a fish that you buy from the fishmonger here in Santa Barbara. So just the fact that the label is there means that somebody's done something to this. Number two, interestingly enough, the current labeling law was manipulated by the Department of Agriculture, and I learned this from Dr. Kessler, because he was in charge of the labeling laws. And when they first had the first labeling laws, any carbohydrate was labeled as a sugar, as it should be. And when they proposed the labeling laws, the Department of Agriculture said, wait a minute, you can't tell people how much sugar is in there because nobody will buy it. The FDA said, but a carbohydrate is a sugar and a sugar is a sugar. It eventually breaks down to sugar. They said, no, you can't do that. No one will buy any of our products. So they compromised and they decided that they would put total carbohydrates on the label. They would put fiber, which is not digested, and then they would put sugars. What they agreed on is if you have two sugar molecules bound together with a chemical bond, that makes it a starch, not a sugar, even though it's two sugar molecules. And you don't have to put it on the label as sugar. You can put it under carbohydrates. We have an enzyme in our mouth called amylase. That's job is to break the double bond on sugar molecules. So the minute it leaves your mouth, it's no longer a starch, it's a sugar. So what I do when I teach patients, and it's one of the best tricks that anybody can do, look at the label, read total carbohydrates in grams, take away the fiber, and that'll actually give you the grams of sugar in that serving. To make that easy to understand, there are 4 grams of carbohydrates in a teaspoon of sugar. So, for instance, a normal piece of bread or a normal tortilla will have about 16 to 18 grams of carbohydrates per slice or per tortilla. There may be 1 gram of fiber. So one piece of bread, and go to the store, do the experiment, has 4 teaspoons of sugar. 1 tortilla has 4 teaspoons of sugar. And as I tell my patients, I can tell you, pour 4 teaspoons of sugar on your hand, you'll actually enjoy that far more than a slice of bread.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what you're eating. And they're just incredulous that, oh my gosh, I had no idea. And the sugar will say 0 or 1 gram. They go, I've been eating all this low sugar products, and no wonder I'm not losing weight. No wonder my triglycerides are high. I thought I was doing the right thing. That's because it was gamed. It was manipulated to let us not know how much is in there.
I think one of the hardest things to incorporate change into our lifestyles is probably our cleaning products, because a lot of people think just because that smell is coming out, that means it's clean. But truly, y'all, you've heard me talk about this time and time again, that smell could actually be a toxin. So something that I've actually incorporated in our household, and I actually send the kits to all of my friends and family members as gifts time and time again, is Branch Basics products. Guys, Branch Basics never set out to sell soap. They truly are on a mission to help people create healthy homes and experience the power of pure. I am totally on this game as well. And someone that has been highly sold is our house cleaner. She has helped toss the toxins with me, and she uses Branch Basics for all of our cleaning necessities at our house. And let me tell you, we don't always live in a clean space. We've got 3 kids, 2 dogs, I've got a husband, so we've got a lot of things to clean up. 3 of the things that have really popped into my shopping cart lately are their new formula laundry detergent. Their toxic-free candle, because baby girl loves a good bath time and sitting by the candles at night when she enjoys her good veggie bowls, and also their hand soap. But 2 of the staples that I live by in our household, and trust me when I tell you I can use this for everything, even on my pups, is their oxygen boost and their liquid gold concentrate. So guys, I'd like to help you get started on your cleaning by giving you 15% off all starter kits. And also, guys, this applies to their hand soap and their toxic-free candle, all the things. Not only will you get your starter kit, but you can get a whole bunch of other items to stock up on. Give the gift to yourself and use my code over at Branch Basics, which is Toxic-Free KB. Guys, again, if you want 15% off, use Toxic-Free KB. Now for one of my all-time favorites from this year, Dr. Taz. Dr. Taz unpacks the complex interplay between hormones, lifestyle, and overall health. In this episode, learn how dirty hormones like androgens can disrupt balance, leading to conditions like PCOS and insulin resistance. Discover practical tips for improving gut health, managing inflammation, and supporting liver function as essential steps to hormonal harmony. Dr. Taz also highlights women's unique hormonal shifts, the impact of diet and exercise, and the mindful use of hormone therapies. Tune into this clip and episode for actionable advice to reclaim your health. Can you please share a case study or an anecdote where integrative medicine specifically impacted one of your patients' lives?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. I think that let's talk about autoimmune disease for a second. Autoimmune diseases, as we know, on the rise. Diseases of inflammation in general are on the rise. I meet so many patients with different forms of autoimmune disease, but let's talk about one in particular. This is a young woman, probably 20s, 30s, somewhere in that range, probably late 20s. And kind of like me, and maybe this is why it sticks in my head, kind of like me, was kind of on top of her game, had her whole life ahead of her, was about to get married, all these different things going on with her, and starts to have gut issues. And the gut issues were, of course, at first they're mild, where her stomach hurts, or now she's running to the bathroom constantly. Then they sort of crescendo and they become bigger and bigger and bigger as time goes by. And by the time she came to me, she had full-fledged inflammatory bowel disease, right? Crohn's, colitis, which is, I think, also on the rise as well. And so her options when she came to me were really twofold. You can go on a biologic, and these are drugs that are very strong. They take over the entire immune system. And the problem with these drugs is that they may work, but at some point they stop working, and then you have to switch drug classes. They deplete the immune system, and they really have a lot of long-term side effects for sure. So option A was to go on a biologic. Option B was to have surgery, or she might have needed a combination of both. So she comes to me because she didn't like her options. And we dive into her health history and her life and everything that was going on. And she had a combination of a couple of things happening. First of all, she was on a diet that did not match her. She had an overgrowth of yeast in the gut. She was eating a high yeast diet. So she was eating a ton of dairy, had a lot of sugar cravings, was drinking alcohol, and no one with a diagnosis of inflammatory bowel disease has sat her down and at least talked to her about the role of diet in this particular disease pattern. So
Doctors don't do that. Doctors are not knowledgeable in nutrition.
They didn't look, they didn't talk. It was just medicine or cut. So as we do our testing, and as we first of all do the Eastern diagnostics, look at her tongue, she's got a thick white coat, look at her face, then do the lab work. And we do a lot of sort of Eastern scanning where you can use technology, but it spits out like an Eastern medicine diagnostic. It suggested the yeast. We do her stool testing. We found the yeast. So then we sit down and we're like, okay, this is the root cause. The root is your overgrowth of yeast that's driving the inflammation, that's driving your inflammatory bowel disease, that's gotten you as sick as you are. Here are your options. We have to clean up your diet. We have to remove all high yeast foods. We have to get rid of the alcohol. We have to rehab the gut, and we have to treat the yeast. So we put her on a protocol. That protocol, I said, please give me 4 weeks, before you make any decision. Because once you go on a medication, then it's very challenging to see if any of the stuff is going to work. I go, give me at least 4 weeks, ideally 6 weeks, to see if we're headed down the right track. When she came into me originally, her CRP and her SED rate, those are markers of inflammation, were so high. Her SED rate was in almost close to 100. Her CRP, which is another marker of inflammation, was around 13 or 14. And within 4 weeks of being on this protocol, those numbers were all cut in half. So they were still not normal, but her inflammation was down in half. She was so encouraged, and she already felt so much better, wasn't going to the bathroom as frequently, wasn't having the pain, all those other things, that she postponed her GI appointments and said, can I please give it another 4 weeks before I go back? I'm like, that's fine, but I do want your entire medical team aware of what you're doing. I'm not trying to create we're right and you're wrong, type situations. So she let them know, and they're like, that's fine, but if those numbers change, you need to come back right away because you can get sicker and sicker and sicker. So sure enough, in another 4 weeks, now 8 weeks have gone by, her numbers normalized. And slowly her body reversed. The inflammation went down. She never needed surgery. She never needed biologics. And she's since then continues to be a patient of the practice. She's had children. She's gotten pregnant. She's done all these things. And she manages it with the protocol that we set. And we also know when she's going to get into trouble, right? If she's in a high stress state or has binged on sugar or something like that, then we know how to come in and manage that so it doesn't set up an inflammatory flare.
And so how long did that process in total take?
For her to get better?
For her to get better from when she was diagnosed.
So, she came to me, by the time she came to me, she had a diagnosis. She already had a diagnosis of 1 year. and had gone through that same journey of multiple specialists and multiple doctors. Then she got to me, and for me, within 90 days, we were able to get her inflammation turned around, and she went into full remission within 6 months.
Just by changing her lifestyle habit,
diet, and rehabbing the gut.
It's so crazy because, the show is called Toxic-Free with KB. And, we live in that lifestyle where everything is especially heavily marketed at us, where we don't know if what we're ingesting even, we'll just use, nutrition, that's a really easy example, is throwing us off so much that, it's setting us up for failure in the end because we're just compiling it on and on and on. And then we turn into like having that IBD or IBS. Is it IBD now?
Well, IBS is the mild version. IBD is when it becomes full-fledged disease pattern.
Wow. Crazy. That is so crazy. But through lifestyle changes, through lifestyle patterns, you can kind of like release that and create something, just, I don't know, create that vibrance back in your life, which I really, truly love.
It's very much like bringing back energy. It's back to that chi, right? It's like
you're not a
bad
problem.
bad chi. No, but it's bringing back chi because what's happening is we're all depleting it with the way we live
and stress
and the environments that we're all in. It's being depleted on a regular, consistent basis. And when you're being depleted, typically you would think I'm building myself back up because I'm eating healthy or I'm doing this or I'm doing that. But a lot of times, even those choices still need additional support because of the environment that we live in today. So it's all about building the energy back for the body to be able to manage the environment that we live in.
Totally. What I love especially about you is that you are all about empowering the woman's superpowers.
Go,
right?
go. Yeah.
Go. I love it because so many women are on the like cutthroat, like, gotta live in a man's world, or I can't help you, build you up. You're going to do better than me. I mean, I've mentioned it multiple times. Some females don't even have a great relationship with their mother figures. There's a little competition there and there's no build up there, right? So I love that you're bringing that on to the whole public, right? I'm embracing it. Could you elaborate on what these superpowers truly are and how they manifest in all of our lives?
Definitely. So one of the things, and again, I got to pull from Chinese and Ayurvedic medicine, older systems of medicine. Women were meant to be in community. They were meant to be collaborative because the family structure and the family unit is and was thought to be so essential and so important, but also so stressful that for one woman to stand on an island and do it by herself was never thought to be realistic. If we go back in time, when women had children, for example, you actually left with your child to go to your mother's house and to the women of the family, where all the women of the family would gather together to take care of you and the child. So it wasn't all on you. You could actually go rest at certain times, right? Imagine that. We've come such a long way from that, right? Where we have this idea of the nuclear family and we're set up in competition against each other. Like, how well are you managing your family and your career versus you, versus you, versus you? And
right.
It's like a fencing game.
Yeah, right.
You know, like, oh my God, I'm so busy. I have so much going on. This one's doing, so we've got a lot of this chatter now. And we as women have lost our sense of community because we're so busy competing and being in the workplace or competing even on a home front to a certain extent. So I think one of our superpowers that we need to re-embrace is building community for ourselves, and maybe that's your immediate family. And it makes me sad to think, because I also have some of that tension, with my mom and some of the women in our family. It makes me sad that tension does exist, right? But if it exists, then go find other women that are like-minded, and they can be of different ages, and each of you nurture each other so that you're able to do what you're supposed to do. Because in community, we do get better and stress goes down. So that's the superpower that we as women have.
Well, so you mentioned different ages, and something I didn't realize until I got a little bit older was that, I moved to Santa Barbara from another town and I didn't know anyone. I didn't know anyone. I got locked in COVID. All hell went loose, And so it took me a couple of years to be like, I can have a friend there or a friend there. My mom actually had moved to the same town. So she had met a couple women that were much older than me, but I started upon building those relationships. I started finding the places that I loved to go to that I would find like-minded women. And that's how you build community. But, with the busy lives that oh gosh, I forgot the air quotes, but the busy lives.
Right.
I love being busy,
Yeah.
busy overboard, but it really does tear us down in the end and disrupts our true relationships and our true community. So I really, really love that you mentioned that. And it gives me a healthy reminder to, put the phone down and actually say like, let's go for a walk. Let's go get a cup of coffee. We have time. It's really nurturing us in more ways than one.
Definitely. And I think you just mentioned the second superpower that I want to make sure we talk about is not only do we function better in community and we are building community. You're married, I'm married. I mean, I don't know if this happens to you, but like I have to arrange my husband's play dates, right? Like I have to help him build his community too.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? So, and I was talking to another female friend about this as well. Like she has to be involved. Otherwise the entire family gets isolated, right? So we're building community, not just for us, but we're also building it for our family members as well. So there's that. But then connected to that, and this is where I think we might have gotten a bit lost, is as much as I believe in my heart that every woman needs to work and have some level of financial independence and sustenance and things like that, I also believe strongly that nothing should be done at the cost of our ability to nurture, because that is one of our superpowers. And if we sign up for so much and I've been there and done this, so I know what this feels like. If we sign up for so much in our lives, work lives, personal lives, whatever, where we can't nurture the people around us, at the end of the day, we're really not happy with ourselves, because that is a fundamental primal nature that we as women have, So I think that when we are structuring our lives, when we're thinking about our health, there's a cost. And I wrote about this in my 2017 book, Superwoman RX. There's a cost and a price to pay if you're going to sacrifice community, self-care time, the ability to nurture. If you sacrifice those things to an extreme, then there's a price to pay. Just as there's a price to pay if you don't have self-sustenance, there's a price to pay for that too. But finding that middle road is the healthiest road. That's where women shine. They don't have mental health issues. That's where they're able to have some financial independence to go and get the appointments that they need without someone sort of telling them what they're supposed to do.
No, so you mentioned like the woman as the nurturer. Yes, the woman is the nurturer to other people, but not forgetting to nurture themselves.
Correct.
Right? With the self-care. And which totally brings me back to you. You look like you're doing everything, right? You're here, you're there, you're writing books, you're healing people, all the things. You're a mother, you're a wife, you're setting up play dates. How do you prioritize self-care in your life? Like, honestly.
So I feel like it's on my calendar. It's on my calendar, right? And I don't have any guilt about going and doing the things I need to do. I did for a long time, right? Like, oh my gosh, if I go to that yoga class, I'm not going to be home on time and the kids won't see me and this is blah, blah, blah. But I don't apologize anymore, because I know if I go to that yoga class or if I go get that massage, right? Or if I go to dinner with a friend, I come back charged, full of energy, full of life, and ready to do even more the next day. But you take those things away from me, and it's almost like my mindset shifts. I start to get negative. I start to get dark. The world is not full of possibility and hope. Instead, it becomes everyone's against me and like they're out to get me. Like it's almost like there's this weird switch.
The mask comes off.
Yes.
You know what I like to call that? Because my husband, time and time and time again, he's like, you need to do what like fills your cup. And I'm like, no, I have to like people please everyone, right? And take care of everyone. And I mean, all he wants is for me to take care of myself. And I realize the same thing when I go to my yoga class, when I go to my acupuncture and I come home, or when I take my bath at the end of the night. I'm like, it's fine. The dog's pinky,
Exactly, right?
But what I like to call that, if I don't do it, I call it the un-me. It's literally the un-me.
I call it the bitch me.
Oh, there we go.
Sorry.
Right?
Yeah.
This conversation with Kayla Barnes-Lenz blew my mind. And if you haven't checked it out yet, I'm sure it will inspire you as well. Kayla is the leading voice in health optimization and longevity. We dive into overcoming chronic illness, biohacking tailored for women, and balancing health priorities on a budget. In this episode, you will learn how to combat the effects of EMFs, implement actionable health strategies, and take control of your overall well-being. Check out one of my favorite moments of this episode and make sure to tune into it and find out just how you too can live up to 150.
We can't think of nature and ourselves as separate entities. Like what we do to the planet, we're also doing to ourselves.
Sure.
We see that I do a lab called the Total Toxic Burden, right?
Ooh.
This is a really comprehensive test that combines environmental toxins, molds and mycotoxins, heavy metals, and so much more. So we see that we're polluting the environment, which is then polluting us. So I have one of the lowest toxic burdens we've ever seen, but I have to go way out of my way in order to make that happen. Most individuals that, for example, come in at the clinic, you have 20 things, 15, 20 things in the high range. So just to be simple, the test is a high range, a medium, and a low range of toxicities, right? And it's looking at hundreds of different potential toxins from, PFAS and BPA, which are environmental toxins, and phthalates, to things like lead and mercury, other heavy metals. And then we're also looking at mycotoxins and, molds.
Right.
So we're definitely polluting the planet, which is also incredibly important. I mean, if you think about, I believe that the Farmer's Almanac says, and not to be, figure tactic here, but we have something like 60 harvests left. We have destroyed our soil with this monocropping culture. So that's one crop being heavily sprayed with things like glyphosate. So not only is glyphosate ruining our soil, it's also ruining our health. Glyphosate is just absolutely universal. Almost, if not every single American has it in their system because it is so heavily used, right? Glyphosate is a pesticide, herbicide, and we know that it's a carcinogen. So we have to stop destroying the planet because it'll also help increase our lifespan and health span just by doing that one thing. So I don't see them as being separate. I mean, I'm in a big school of thought of combining ancestral practices with modern science, right? So the ability to get sun. I know it's a very controversial thing in the longevity space and when, you speak to dermatologists, but it's like we are light beings.
Totally.
We used to
Biophotons, right?
rise with the sun, fall asleep with the sun. Now our circadian rhythms are so out of whack. People are staying up all night watching Netflix and scrolling their cell phones when they should be in bed sleeping. So what we do to the planet, we're doing to ourselves. So I think it's really something that needs to be addressed. And when I'm developing my protocols and routines, I mean, I'm supporting and purchasing, regeneratively produced vegetables, fruits, and, only doing grass-fed, grass-finished. These are practices that will help the earth in the long run that we've really just gotten away from.
Ancestral practices. I love that you pointed that out because a lot of people think that making a change in their life, and I want to kind of point this out here and we'll touch on it more and more, that it's so difficult and so hard. And I feel like a lot of the times that could be excuses or cover-ups of fear, and saying like, oh, I don't know if I want to change, right? Or the uneducated, like, I don't know what's right. I don't know what's wrong. I don't know what I should be doing. But it's simple practices like going back to what the ancestors did, the cavemen, the cavewomen did, right? I love that you brought that up 100%. I also love that you brought up the Farmer's Almanac because my husband laughs at me because I'm like, oh, I wonder what type of winter we're going to have this year. I'm like, I'll just check the Farmer's Almanac. And he's like, really? He's like, not again? So I love that you're like on my page about that. But I want to jump into really quickly. You mentioned the total toxin burden or toxic burden protocol.
Total toxic burden, yeah.
Okay. So this test that you're referring to, is this something that people can order themselves or do they need to go through a practitioner? And if so, where can they get it?
Yeah. So it is needed to be called in by a practitioner or a clinician. You can, I'm sure, just look. So I get this test through a company called Vibrant Wellness.
Yep.
And it's essentially multiple tests combined, but you can easily find it. Also, I believe you might be able to go on Rupa and find like a provider near you.
Okay.
I love the Institute for Functional Medicine. So at my clinic, we, get a lot of people from the IFM. And if you go into ifm.com or .org, we can link it in the show notes, you can find a functional medicine practitioner, because a lot of these tests, they are quite an investment. So you want to have someone that actually knows how to read it and give you a protocol. Receiving information is great, but if you don't know what to do with it, then it's not super helpful. So most of the times, like, at my clinic, if you're in Ohio or California, you can see practitioners at my clinic, but the actual protocol is included in the price of the test. So you get a consult and a plan of what to do after you get the results.
Oh my gosh, I love this. I'm doing this one because I've done a whole slew of different tests, whether it's GI maps or the mycotoxins, all the things, but to have something that's like a one-stop shop bundle that I can just kind of like revisit every once in a while to see what my levels are, I think that's excellent. Definitely, guys, put that in your note sheet. Put it in your wish list for the holidays, for sure.
Yeah.
I have a practitioner back in Santa Barbara at the Longevity Center. She actually, I think, just went to the conference in Switzerland that you were at.
Yeah.
We had this conversation, and I think I was referring to, oh my gosh, LeBron James. There was something about how much he invests in his wellness and his recovery. And I was talking to her, and I was like, me too. But, it makes me feel so great at the end of the day. And she goes, well, what would life be without investing in yourself? Like that's the best investment that you can make. So when it comes down, I want to kind of put this out there, and you'll probably agree that, things cost money, but also you spend a lot of money on things that are perhaps hurting you, killing you, or even just wasting your time, just junk. So why not spend your money on something that's going to enliven you, know?
I mean, of course. I mean, I hope that this begins to change, right? Like I would like to see this become more widely available, but I have quite a few thoughts on this topic. One is like, I don't have a budget for handbags or nightclubs or alcohol or dining out. I don't do any of those things because A, they don't promote my health, but also I would rather put my resources into the one body that I have. If you were told that you get a car and it's the only car that you're ever going to have for the rest of your life, how are you going to treat that car? Way better than we're treating our bodies. Like we are doing things on a daily basis that is destroying us right now and definitely destroying us in the future. If you think that your health is bad now, think about it, what it's going to be in 10 years if you don't stop, overindulging in these ultra processed foods, if you don't stop being sedentary. I mean, you mentioned earlier that there's a variety of reasons, and one of them could be lacking discipline, right? For not actually executing. Number one, the biggest things, and I talk to all of these different companies. I have a great relationship with even True Diagnostics, and I'm asking them, what do you see as the biggest movers on health? Like, what's the biggest lever to pull? And it's not hyperbaric chamber, which yes, I do that. It's not necessarily plasmapheresis. It's not EBU. It's not peptides. Not all these amazing things. It's the things that you do every single day. What do? We eat, we breathe, we sleep, we move, and we have social connection, right? And we drink water. So if you can optimize those areas, drinking water, get, reverse osmosis, water filtration system, get an air filter, go to bed early, go to bed at 8:30. I'm in bed every day by 8:30, and then I wake up naturally. I don't need an alarm clock. And when the sun goes down, we're not meant to be eating. We're meant to be sleeping when it's dark out. So prioritize sleep, move your body. We were never meant to be these sedentary beings. Like we need to move. We need to have low level movement. We need to have intentional exercise. We need to have mobility. These things take time. But if you think that it's hard now, think about how much harder it's going to be in the future if you don't prioritize these things. Because living with chronic disease and a scary diagnosis is a lot worse than putting in that effort now. So, our brains aren't naturally wired to want to do the hard thing for an extended period of time. Our brains are wired to want to have the most reward with the least amount of resistance. So yes, it's something that we have to go against on a daily basis. But I always recommend people, you have to know what your purpose is. Like, why do you want to be healthy, right? If you don't have a purpose, you're never going to stick to this. So when I first started doing all of this, I had my purpose right in front of me all the time. I wrote it down. And when I originally started, I've been an entrepreneur since I was 17. I started my first company. I had no clue what I was doing. I was just figuring it out. It was a marketing company back then. And I was super interested in health too. So it was like more skewed towards health brands. But I was just learning on the go, but I had to remind myself every day that I want a different life than I had when I grew up. I did not grow up from a super healthy family. I didn't grow up with any money. I think a lot of people on the internet now see that I have all these nice things. I got them because I worked really, really, really hard for them, like most entrepreneurs that do great things, right? And I had to remind myself, like, I want to have a life that I never had. And so that's why I have to be healthy, because I have to be able to be more focused. I have to be more motivated. And I have to have the drive that it's going to take to get me there.
I was actually just going to jump into that because I was very curious. Whenever I talk to people, whenever I interview people, or just on the street, I'm curious about their childhood upbringing, because me personally, I'm really diving deep into my inner child work. I think ever since I got married, a lot of things have started to come up. And, I was talking to you how I have 3 stepchildren. A lot of, mirror balls are coming at me. So I was curious, I'm like, how did you get into this?
Well, going way back, I grew up in a real small town in Ohio and grew up on a very standard American diet. Was eating Pop-Tarts. We had food stamps at times. Anyone that had a free lunch card, you know what I'm talking about. So I definitely didn't grow up with this sort of lifestyle, right? My parents were divorced and, I could share more of the story. We don't have to go into all the details, but my mother was married several different times. So there was, in my opinion, I had to upgrade the software of my brain, which is how I thought, to be able to achieve great things. And I also had to upgrade the hardware of my body and my brain, right? So that's how I treated it, exercise, food, all of that. So also, though, diet culture was a really big thing in my family, right? So my mom was always on a diet. My grandma was always starting a diet on Monday. It was always starting the diet on Monday,
Seems like the time, right?
Yeah, it's always on Monday. So I had an awareness, just from childhood of eating healthy, right? But it was not really eating healthy. My mom was doing the best she could, but it wasn't the nutritional advice I would, now follow. So when I got into college, I wanted to start studying nutrition. So I did. And I started to learn more about how the body worked. And I just started making small upgrades. Like, it was nothing crazy at first. Just getting rid of, conventional foods and opting for organic and, really trying to have more time not eating. So I wasn't just eating snacks all day, which is what was normal in my house. We would have a snack before bed. So I just started to research and, not only learned my studies, but I did a ton of self-education. So found people like Mark Hyman and Dave Asprey and all these people like over a decade ago that were talking about this. Later, I really decided, it was like we put so much focus on the body, right? Like how we look. And so I was like, I found Dr. Jana Lehman, who is this brain doctor who revolutionized psychiatry by actually looking at the brain. I did all of his coursework, and then I started thinking, okay, this is how I'm going to change my life, right? I'm going to upgrade my brain with my diet and my exercise and my sleep and all that stuff. And then I'm going to start upgrading the software, like these limiting beliefs that have been instilled in me. Like, nobody ever told me that I would be where I'm at now when I was a kid. That was never even a thing. So got obsessed with brain health, really dove deep into that. Kind of started this concierge brain health coaching practice, worked with some executives and athletes just to take their cognitive performance from good to great through all the, modalities and therapies we talked about. 4 years ago, I co-opened a longevity medicine clinic, which has been incredible because it's one thing to read about the research and hear from studies what works, but it's completely different to see in a clinical practice people getting better from these really innovative therapies. We do ozone, we do NAD, we do methylene blue, we have a red light bed, a hyperbaric oxygen chamber, an ozone sauna, we do ozone IVs, e-boost, stem cells. We literally do everything. So it's super fun to see how those therapies are benefiting our patients in such a massive way. So yeah, it's been a real long build. It wasn't overnight. I changed everything. it was incorporating these habits and building on them over time.
And finally, we have this conversation with my new friend, Sabrina Zohar. Sabrina is a renowned dating coach, entrepreneur, and host of the Sabrina Zohar Show. In this conversation, we unravel the mysteries of modern dating with psychology-backed insights. You will learn to spot red and green flags, set boundaries, and overcome relationship anxiety. Sabrina dives into how past trauma shapes connections, navigating dating apps, and why self-worth is the key to love that lasts. Enjoy this clip and make sure to tune into the entire episode. Red flags versus green flags. What are some red flags that get overlooked?
So when we look at red flags, what that really is just it's an alert about behavior and characteristics of a person, right? So we'll get like, oh, red flag, they didn't call me. And it's like, that's not a fucking red flag. You know what a red flag is? Blatant disrespect. Somebody gaslighting you, somebody going against what you're trying to say, someone who's rude to the waitstaff, right? Like the red flags they are inclination that this is a personality, maybe if you want to say defect, right? But this is a personality trait that is concerning to me, right? And I hear this all the time of like, oh, well, he talked about this, that's a red flag. And it's like, I'd love to know what's a red flag about it. What made you uncomfortable about what this person said versus green flags? Green flags aren't that he texts me every morning, good morning. No, that's actually to me more of a red flag because I'm like, you met this person once and they're already texting you every single day. Like, I'm a little confused, right? Like, and hey, if you're cool with it, you can walk away from this, do you? But too many people look at that as, yay, keep going. When it's like, no, a green flag to me is, are they consistent? Consistency doesn't mean, yeah, they call me every day at the same time. No, that's not consistent. That's predictable. Consistent means they're reliable and their words and actions align, right? And how are you going to know that? It takes time. That is not something that you're going to be able to tell off the first 2 weeks. You can see, because I'll get this, he was consistent. And I'm like, until, right, for 2 weeks. It's like, so then they weren't consistent. That was an act. So we want to see, are they consistent? Are they reliable? Are they reciprocal, right? Is this reciprocity? Am I serving a ball and you're serving it back? Do they respect my boundaries? Do they validate my feelings? Do I feel safe with them emotionally, not just physically? That's also a huge part. Do I feel seen, heard, and understood? Right? Like, do I feel like this person really values what I'm saying? Do they celebrate my wins or are they in competition with me? Right? Like, does this person get curious? Are they curious about what's going on with me? Or are they just using that and putting it in their back pocket and then they're going to use that on me in 2 months? So when we're looking at red flags or green flags, what we want to look at is this a personality of a person, right? That's the red flag of, oh, they gaslight. Oh, they're manipulative. Oh, they keep canceling. They're flaky. That's a personality of this person, not just, oh, they have a green car and I don't like her. It's like, oh my God. Right? Because then we start to look at those icks and all of this. And what I see is too much rigidity. And when there's too rigid, then what we're doing is, oh, you're just trying to find a problem. As opposed to, yikes, the red flag was, this guy discredited me, right? Like when I expressed myself, they told me you sound crazy. And like we said, that is a triggering word. There's no such thing. There's no such thing as crazy.
Yeah. What does that mean?
What does that mean, right? My friend Britt Frank is a neuropsychotherapist and she's like, there's no such thing. What we say is it's trauma, right? You're not crazy. There's no such thing as it. But it allows us to go, oh, right, so I'm not. And I think what we want to look at is, does this person respect you, right? Like I can imagine as you're thinking back on your relationship, you're like, yeah, he was consistent. He was thoughtful, right? He was compassionate, empathetic, right? Gave me a space to express myself. Didn't judge me for being vulnerable. Those are all the beautiful red flags we're looking for. Not the, oh, well, he's really well dressed or she's really pretty. And it's like, yeah, that's going to fade.
Yeah. He gave me his time. I think that was a huge green flag. If I could share some of my green flags.
Please.
He gave me his time. My husband is we're both pretty busy, but he is one of the busiest people I've ever known. And I was telling you I was pretty new into town and we would go on walks. Like he would leave his office and we'd go on walks.
It's huge.
And
they're fitting you into their life authentically.
Right. And I was like, he doesn't have time. And so I would be like, thank you so much for giving me your time because he literally is on phone calls after phone calls, meetings after meetings every single day. He has 3 kids, all these things. And I was like, he gave me his time to nurture our relationship. The other thing is we're talking about trauma, right? We've both been through trauma on both sides, and you and me. And
oh yeah,
the hardest part of my relationship being with him is that I had to see my trauma and I had to be brave to say, oh my God, he's going to make me like peel off the scabs so they can breathe and heal. And
not add salt to them.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's been hard, but it's been so beautiful because he has literally like perpetuated and been the catalyst to my healing. And
it's beautiful.
So many things in life.
And that's what it's like. There is only so much you could do alone. And then there's a lot that you could do with someone else.
Yeah.
My partner and I cannot relate more. It's like we are breaking through barriers and things of like, he didn't realize he has his shit. I didn't realize I do my things. And it's such a beautiful experience to have someone. And like, to your point, I love that you mentioned he made time for me, because how many people would go, well, they don't take me out and they're not doing this. And like, they're always busy. And it's like, you're right. There is no one busier than someone that's not interested, right? Like there is nobody on this place. Sorry, I'm busy. Oh, sorry, I'm busy. And it's like, there's a difference between sorry, I'm busy as an excuse versus I'm swamped today. I can make time for you do you have an hour? Can I just see you for a walk?
Yes.
Two different experiences. And what's beautiful is you saw that as, wow, thank you so much for making the time, which allowed him to feel more comfortable to give you more and to let you into more, because he was like, wow, she respects me. She's not attacking me. Because I've had it where clients will call me like, well, fuck this guy and all this. And I'm like, and then you wonder why he's not opening up to you. You wonder why this person doesn't feel comfortable, because you need them to do what you want, as you want it, when you want it, but you're not looking at how this person's trying to love you. Like my partner, when we first met, we went on a couple of dates. Like we went out to, we went like hiking and dinner on our first day. And then our second date was like an arcade, like we tried to do fun stuff. And he's a cook. Like he's not a chef by trade, but like this man can whip up 5-star meals.
Oh, wow.
Oh, it's incredible. And so he had me on our third date. He was like, I came over. I said, let me cook for you. It was pathetic. I'm not a chef. And on the fourth date, he was like, why don't I cook for you? And I was like, okay. And so I went over and he made me dinner. And then like, it would be probably, there was like another 4 dates like that. And I remember calling my mom and she goes, no, he needs to take you out. What are you, a call girl? No. And I talked to him about it and I said, hey, I so appreciate all of this, but like, I do want to still be courted. And he even stopped and he was like, oh my God, absolutely. And in that moment, that's when I realized like, oh, this is how you're trying to show me that you care about me, not love me because you didn't know me that well. But I could have totally overlooked that. But he made it a whole thing, right? I came over and there was like my favorite meal made and like my dessert was sitting there. And it was like, you could see he thought about it. He was caring. And that's what he had to offer me. It wasn't that he took me to these fancy places and all of that, but had I not seen it, I would have totally overlooked it. Kind of very similar to you of, wait a minute, this is how this person's showing up for me. Can we make space that not everybody lives in the way that we do? And if that works for me, right, and you, explore it and allow this person to open up a little bit more.
Right. When one person opens up, the other person will open up.
If they have the bandwidth, absolutely.
If they have the bandwidth.
Totally.
You were talking about, well, actually in the beginning, we were talking about going slow in dating. So what are 3 tips of going slow in dating?
Going slow is not an excuse for bad behavior. And we have to remember that going slow isn't just mean that like this person just never calls you, right? Going slow just means you're not expediting the stages of a relationship quicker than they need to be. So that means that like, yeah, if I've just known you for a week, that doesn't mean that I'm meeting your friends and family. And like I've had that where like, oh, the first month we went on 2 trips and I met their family. And it's like, and then you wonder why this person ghosted, because the pinch doesn't match the outs. When you start at 100, where else are you going to go? So we want to be able to add in and do things. The second aspect is have boundaries. Do not, I can't tell you how many times I hear it of like, oh, they asked me out for Friday. Okay, so I'll cancel my plans. No. Live your life. You have your girls' night, go to your girls' night. Like you had plans to go away that weekend and this person's only free then. Sorry, babe. I'll see you when I get back. It's okay to say no and set boundaries. It's a beautiful thing when going slow. And the third thing I would say is really focus on the narrative and your nervous system. Because when we go slow, right, again, it's not an excuse for bad behavior. You can still have conversations of depth. You can still be vulnerable and transparent, but you don't need to trauma dump, right? Like on my first date, I don't need to start telling people how my father was abusive to me. Like that person doesn't need to know all of this about me, at least for my comfort level, right? And so for me, going slow just means that I'm giving you enough to show me where I fit into your life. And I want to see, because it's like a contract renegotiation, right? Like I send it back, you send it back to me. Okay, let's keep another round. And it's more about like trust is earned. I give you a little, I see how you, great, I give you more. And that to me, I think is why going slow is beautiful, because you're able to your point, right? You guys went slow in the physical aspect as well. And like you said, you were able to build such a beautiful foundation that wasn't rocked versus first month, oh, we moved in together and we did all this. And you're like, yeah, but you had nothing keeping this building afloat. So one rainstorm comes in and the whole lot is down because you didn't have a solid foundation to begin with.
Right. I 100% agree with that. On the topic of setting boundaries, on that topic, how can people set healthy boundaries without feeling like they're pushing them away?
Well, let's talk about that. One, where'd you learn that from? Right? Where did you learn that setting a boundary means I'm going to lose this person? Right? For me, that was my dad. When I'd set a boundary, he would leave. So I always thought my needs are, okay, no, I can't say anything. Oh, wait, that doesn't mean that that's accurate. A second thing, a boundary doesn't keep people out. They protect what's in. A boundary is so that I can continue to show up sustainably and have you in my life. So people misconstrue it all the time with like a boundary, like you can't call me after 9. No. That person can absolutely call you after 9. You just don't have to answer. The boundary isn't you're not allowed to. A boundary isn't about the other person. You can't do this. You can't do this. The boundary is I will not answer the phone after 9 o'clock should you call me.
Airplane mode.
Exactly. Same. D&D. I don't remember the last time I heard my phone make a noise or a ring.
Same.
Ooh, remember the days we used to pay for ringtones? So it's just important when we look at our boundaries, are our boundaries rigid, right? We don't want it to be like, it's my way or the highway. Boundaries can be flexible of like, oh, you know what? Okay, I could do 8:30, right? Normally I don't do past it. Fine, I could do 8:15. So it's about knowing what's a non-negotiable, right? Yeah. Versus, and I think we misconstrue that because the point of a boundary means that I want to keep you in my life. I'm not trying to get rid of you. And I want to keep you by telling you this is what I need from you in order to keep showing up as myself.
So what are some common signs, like if someone's like totally like over the moon for someone and they're trying to set boundaries, but someone's not respecting them, what are some common signs that they should truly open up their eyes and see that they're not being respected?
I think it's about how do they speak to you, right? So if I say, hey, I'm so sorry, like I can't make 6 o'clock, or like for me, I don't drink alcohol. It's just like not my thing.
Me neither.
Yeah, it's not my vice. And so when I used to tell guys, if I would set that and be like, hey, I'm sorry, I don't drink alcohol. If they were respecting my boundary, no worries, let's try somewhere else versus, come on, don't be such a square. Come on, oh my God, don't be lame. What, grandma? And I was like, cool, you're disrespecting me.
Yeah.
Right? And then that's where we want to look. Like if you're saying, I keep setting boundaries, it's like, then stop allowing those people to cross them. Boundaries don't mean shit if you don't implement them. If I tell you, hey, don't touch that, and then you touch it, why would I keep inviting you over? I said, don't touch it. That's on me then. Mm-hmm. Again, a boundary is not to control somebody else. It's that I can look and go, oh, you don't respect what I say? No, thank you. And so that is where I would say, again, what's the dysregulation? What's happening in our bodies? If I told you to come over and said, please leave your shoes at the door. There's actually 7 types of boundaries. It's like, I don't know all of them. It's like a space boundary. There's emotional boundaries. There's a home boundary. Like there's different types. And so if I said, hi, could you please leave your shoes at the door? And you still walk into my house. Hi, excuse me. I asked you to please leave your shoes at the door. The dog, it brings in dirt. If you don't, what's my next move? Hi, okay, then you can leave the house.
Yeah.
Versus if they just keep walking, because guess what they just learned is you don't mean anything. Your boundaries don't mean anything. You're not implementing them.
Yeah. I mean, that goes through and through with everything in life.
Everything.
I think, just applying that to dating or relationships in general. I think relationships with children, that is something I've had to learn like so fast. And it's to be honest with you, Sabrina, it's brought up a lot of growth within me, but it also some triggers that I've had to work through because I'm like, I still feel like I just like popped into this picture here. But now obviously I'm really solidified. I'm like, I'm an adult. Hello. I'm much older than you. But, like those things, I told my clients that, when you set boundaries, it shows the other person how they treat you.
Exactly.
Right?
And what you allow. Because if I set a boundary and you don't respect it, then it's on me. That's not on you. I'm not, because again, a boundary is not to control someone else. It's only to say, because then what the next response is, then I'm going to remove myself. It's like talking to a child. Okay, I told you, like, if you're not, okay, well, then I'm going to have to walk out. Like, I'm going to have to remove myself from the situation if you're going to keep doing that because I can't talk to you if you're going to say that.
Yeah.
And it's really important because then what happens is narcissists and people like that, people that are out of malice, let's say, if you are consistently setting boundaries and then the person is doing it anyways, then let me tell you, they don't respect you and they don't believe you because I hate to say it, but you're full of shit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, truly. It's also a nice, beautiful way to kind of say like, these are the needs that I need to be met in my life.
Totally.
Yeah. So going into this term, God, I feel like an old woman. I'm like Kansas, like naive girl. You were like saying all these terms, walking. I'm like, what's that?
Yeah. You're like, I'm gonna get Google out real quick.
I mean, even just like within the last year, I learned what situationship meant, and I'm like, what? You know? So like, let's talk about situationships.
situationships are just a lack of communication. That's all there is. All right. Like, and that's the thing. Yeah. Because that's the thing. I saw an article and they're like, Gen Z created a new term called situationship. And I was like, get bent. That's been around for millennia. They didn't create that. All a situationship means is one or both are not communicating their needs. So if we're in a situationship, because usually what you'll hear is like, I'm in this situationship. Okay, yeah, well, I don't know how they feel. I don't know where they're at. I don't know what they want. But we're keep like hugging. So what you're doing is you're having a romantic or physical connection without any clear boundaries or understanding of what you're doing. So more often than not, like, that's why I'm like, no. Think back on early dating when you're like, no, I definitely dated people where I was too scared to say anything. They would have me to come over and I would just do it because I just hoped that they were going to choose me. That's a situationship, right? Neither one of you are communicating wants and needs. Maybe the other person might have mentioned, I don't know if I'm just going to go with the flow, right? I don't want any commitment. There's no labels. There's no commitment. There's no clear understanding of what you're doing. That's a situationship.
So if there's no clarity, you can't cry if you get hurt.
It's one of those where I'm like, cool, why are you allowing this, right?
Yeah.
Like, for me, if I'm going to date, I don't want to push them away. I don't want to be too much. Again, where'd you learn that from? That you having a need? Because here's the thing. You're right. You might push them away. You might be too much, quote unquote. It's not you who is, it's what you want because that person was never going to do it. Right? Because if I came to you, you and I are dating hypothetically, and we've been sleeping together for 2 months and no one's saying anything. And I come to you and say, I'd really love a relationship. I don't just want physical. I don't want just a casual. Yeah, that might be too much for them because that person doesn't have the emotional bandwidth and doesn't want a relationship. So of course it's going to send them running. Good. Let me hold the door open for you.
Yeah.
Because that gets me closer to what I want, not further away.
Yeah, communication, define the relationship. If that's what you want, like set the boundaries, right? Set the boundaries. Thank you all again for watching and listening to the show. It means the world to me that you guys tune in each and every episode. Make sure you are subscribed to be alerted for a powerful lineup we have coming up in 2025 because baby, it's gonna be big. And as always, I like to say, you're doing your best and your best is great. See you next time. Thanks for watching Toxic Free with KB. Please subscribe to the show, comment below, and check us out on Instagram at toxicfree.kb and TikTok at toxicfreewithkb. See you next time. This is a Kilo Bravo Media production brought to you by Rainbow Creative.